Early life and family, 1918 to 1934. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, into the Royal Thembu family in the small village of Mvizo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. His father, Gadla Henry Mfakaniiswa, was a respected chief, counselor, and guardian of tribal traditions. Mandela's mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was the third of Gadla's 4 wives. The family lived in a modest rondavelle, a traditional round thatched roof hut. Mandela's childhood was deeply influenced by the customs and traditions of the Thembu people. He spent his early years herding cattle and playing with friends in the rolling hills and lush valleys of the Eastern Cape. It was here that he learned the importance of community, respect for one's elders, and the stories of his ancestors, which instilled in him a sense of identity and pride in his African heritage. As a young boy, Mandela was given the name Ralilala, which means pulling the branch of a tree in Xhosa. This name was often used colloquially to describe a troublemaker, and it hinted at the spirit of determination and rebellion that would become synonymous with his life. In 1927, when Mandela was just 9 years old, his father died. This event had a profound impact on his life, as he was adopted by the Thembu regent, Chief Janjantaba Dalindyebo. This move exposed him to a more formal education and the prospect of greater opportunities beyond the confines of his village. Education and early activism, 1934 to 1943. Mandela's journey into formal education began at the local primary school in Kunu. He was a diligent student and showed a remarkable aptitude for learning. His talent was evident, and his teacher, Miss Mdingane, played a pivotal role in shaping his early life. It was Miss Mdingane who gave him the English name Nelson on his first day of school, in keeping with the colonial practice of assigning English names to African students. In 1934, at the age of 16, Mandela transitioned to the Clarkberry Boarding Institute and later to Helltown, where he continued his education. These schools were missionary institutions that offered a Western-style education, exposing Mandela to new ideas and experiences. He developed a keen interest in literature, politics, and debating, which would serve as a foundation for his future activism. While in Johannesburg in 1943 to avoid an arranged marriage, Mandela took up work as a security guard and continued his studies at the University of Fort Hare. This prestigious institution was known for producing many future African leaders. However, his involvement in student protests against the university's policies led to his expulsion in 1944. These early experiences, including his exposure to the racial discrimination faced by black South Africans in the urban areas, laid the groundwork for Mandela's growing political awareness and his eventual commitment to the struggle for justice and equality in South Africa. A Life of Law and Politics, 1944 to 1952. After his expulsion from the University of Fort Hare, Mandela moved to Johannesburg, the bustling epicenter of South Africa's economic and political activities. It was here that he began to work as a law clerk at a white-owned law firm while simultaneously studying for his Bachelor of Arts degree through the University of South Africa, eventually completing his degree via correspondence courses. Mandela's life in Johannesburg exposed him to the harsh realities of apartheid, a deeply entrenched system of racial segregation and discrimination. He became increasingly involved in political activities aimed at dismantling apartheid. In 1943, he joined the African National Congress, ANC, an organization committed to fighting for the rights of black South Africans. By 1944, he was part of a group of young, radical members within the ANC who advocated for more direct action against apartheid policies. This group formed the African National Congress Youth League, ANCYL, which Mandela would become actively involved in. In 1952, Mandela and his colleague Oliver Tambo took a significant step by establishing South Africa's first black law firm. Their legal practice was dedicated to providing counsel to black South Africans who faced discrimination under apartheid laws. This venture not only helped many oppressed individuals, but also allowed Mandela to hone his legal skills and develop a deeper understanding of the systemic injustices of apartheid. The Defiance Campaign and Imprisonment, 1952 to 1964. The early 1950s marked a turning point in Nelson Mandela's activism. In 1952, he played a pivotal role in the launch of the Defiance Campaign against apartheid laws. This campaign encouraged nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience, and Mandela was appointed as the National Volunteer-in-Chief, a position that placed him at the forefront of the struggle. As the campaign progressed, Mandela's commitment to nonviolent resistance was tested when the apartheid government responded with brutality. Mass arrests, police violence, and repression became the norm. Despite this, Mandela remained steadfast in his belief in the power of nonviolence as a means of achieving change. In 1960, the Sharpeville Massacre, in which police killed 69 unarmed protesters, led the ANC to reconsider its approach. The government declared a state of emergency, and the ANC was banned. In response, Mandela and others began to consider more radical forms of resistance. In 1961, he co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, MK, the armed wing of the ANC, to carry out acts of sabotage against government infrastructure. Mandela's involvement in MK ultimately led to his arrest in 1962. Rivonia trial and 27 years in prison, 1964 to 1990. The Rivonia trial of 1964 was a defining moment in Nelson Mandela's life and the struggle against apartheid. Alongside other prominent ANC leaders, including Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, and Dennis Goldberg, Mandela was put on trial for his role in planning sabotage against the apartheid regime. The trial took its name from the suburb of Rivonia in Johannesburg, where many of the accused had been arrested. During the trial, Mandela delivered a powerful speech from the dock in which he proclaimed his dedication to the ideals of equality, justice, and a democratic, non-racial South Africa. He famously stated that he was prepared to die for these principles. Ultimately, Mandela and his co-accused were sentenced to life in prison, narrowly avoiding the death penalty. Mandela spent the next 27 years in prison, primarily on Robben Island, a desolate and isolated former leper colony off the coast of Cape Town. Life on the island was harsh, with forced labor, limited visitation rights, and harsh living conditions. Despite this, Mandela remained resilient and unwavering in his commitment to the anti-apartheid struggle. During his imprisonment, Mandela used his time to study, educate his fellow inmates, and engage in political discussions with other prisoners. He secretly wrote letters, smuggled out messages, and maintained correspondence with supporters both within South Africa and abroad. His leadership from behind bars and his unbreakable spirit inspired a new generation of activists. Negotiations and release, 1990 to 1994. In 1990, after 27 years of imprisonment, Nelson Mandela was finally released from Victor Verster prison on February 11th. His release marked a momentous turning point in South Africa's history and the struggle against apartheid. The world watched as Mandela emerged from prison, his spirit unbroken, and his commitment to justice stronger than ever. Upon his release, Mandela immediately embarked on a mission of reconciliation and negotiation. He met with South African President F.W. de Klerk, who had initiated the process of reform, and the two leaders began a series of discussions aimed at ending apartheid peacefully and transitioning to a multiracial democracy. The negotiations were challenging, as they had to address the concerns and fears of both black and white South Africans. Mandela and de Klerk faced immense pressure from their respective constituencies, but they persisted in their efforts to find common ground. In 1991, negotiations led to the repeal of apartheid laws, and the ANC was unbanned, allowing Mandela and other exiled leaders to return to South Africa. Throughout this period, Mandela's leadership was characterized by his commitment to nonviolence and his determination to build a South Africa where all citizens, regardless of race, would have equal rights and opportunities. He also worked to establish trust and cooperation with political opponents, including the Inkatha Freedom Party led by Chief Mengisuthu Buthelezi. Presidency in the Rainbow Nation, 1994 to 1999. In 1994, South Africa held its first multiracial democratic elections. Nelson Mandela, the iconic leader of the African National Congress, ANC, stood as the ANC's presidential candidate. The election, often referred to as the Rainbow Nation election, saw an overwhelming victory for the ANC, signaling the end of apartheid rule. On May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as South Africa's first black president. His presidency was marked by a commitment to reconciliation, justice, and nation-building. He appointed a diverse cabinet that included members of various racial and political backgrounds, symbolizing his vision of a unified South Africa. One of Mandela's most significant acts as president was the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC. The TRC aimed to address the atrocities committed during the apartheid era by allowing both victims and perpetrators to come forward and share their stories in exchange for amnesty, forgiveness, or prosecution. This process played a vital role in healing the wounds of a divided nation. Mandela's presidency also focused on dismantling the remaining vestiges of apartheid, promoting social and economic justice, and working towards creating a society where all South Africans could enjoy equal opportunities. His single term in office set an example of peaceful transition of power when he stepped down in 1999, further solidifying South Africa's status as a democratic nation. Post-presidential years and global advocacy, 2000s. After leaving the presidency, Nelson Mandela remained active in various humanitarian and political causes. He continued to be a tireless advocate for peace, human rights, and social justice, both in South Africa and around the world. Mandela dedicated significant efforts to combat the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which had ravaged South Africa. He openly acknowledged the crisis, helping to reduce stigma around the disease and advocating for increased awareness, prevention, and treatment programs. Globally, Mandela's stature as a revered statesman and symbol of reconciliation made him a sought-after mediator and advocate for peace. He was instrumental in brokering negotiations in conflict zones and promoting peaceful resolutions to disputes. In 2001, Mandela was diagnosed with prostate cancer, but he continued his work despite his health challenges. He also focused on various charitable initiatives, including the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which was established to promote his legacy and support charitable activities. Legacy and passing, 2013-present. Nelson Mandela passed away on December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy lives on. South Africa and the world mourned the loss of a beloved leader and global icon. Mandela's legacy encompasses his unwavering dedication to freedom, equality, and reconciliation. He remains an enduring symbol of resistance against oppression, a champion of justice, and a beacon of hope for those who strive to overcome adversity. In the years following his passing, Nelson Mandela's life story continues to inspire generations. His values and principles serve as a reminder of the power of resilience, compassion, and the belief in the possibility of a better, more just world. His impact on South Africa and the global struggle for human rights will be remembered for generations to come.